Oh, oh, it's okay. He ended up taking him down to his. He have been pulling out for the tractor.
Okay.
So he put it on to co-op. And they haven't. So back to the game, so. It's nothing really does. Try to in the tractor or standard. Size. So, yeah. Not like tractor tires.
Yeah.
No, yeah, how about you? I guess we did 6 months to work. Oh, wow.
I have a lot of blood and blood types.
Oh, good.
Let's call this meeting of the pension board together at 4:03. Everyone rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's like Brian's either late or going to be absent, so I'll motion at this point that we list him as an unexcused absence, and we can change it later in the meeting if we get. So I need a second.
Okay.
Christine seconds. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Let's see, Sue?
Here.
Steve? Here. David? Here. Jason? Here. Christine?
Here.
And myself. Thank you. Anybody have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Anybody have any conflicts of interest of any business that would take place during this meeting? Please notify now. Do we have any correspondence?
No.
Okay. Any guests or presentations?
No guests
So,
or no presentations.
if everybody would review the previous meeting minutes from June, believe it or not. Pension board meeting, if you have any deletion, corrections, or additions, make known.
Okay, so we say that Director Cerna was absent, but then we say that he provided a highlight of the current report.
Inspector was not, we did it, just kind of by committee. That's correct.
That was a good catch, too. Okay, any other additions, corrections, deletions? No? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June?
So moved.
Two moves. Do I have a second? Christine seconds. All those in
Do you
favor?
want to do it with a motion with the?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, just the corrections noted. Okay.
So let me pull that motion and restate it. Do we have a motion to approve the pension board meeting minutes for the June, including the corrections stated.
All motion.
Sue?
Yeah.
Motions, Christine, second. Okay, got it. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Treasurer's report. Anything? Really don't have anything.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I'll make note of from our side of it. So go to page 7 of the report, which talks about the contributions.
Yep.
So that carries through June 30th of 2022. We hadn't made our contribution yet for the year. But as you jump forward a little bit farther, we are in the window now where the state has opened the state match portion.
Right.
So I did complete, and one on page 10, you'll see we made our portion of the state match in full, to then include that in with the application process for the state match for the 10-5-1. So the required contribution for this year, the actuarial required contribution with the elections that were selected in December of 2021, made the required contribution a total of 116,417. So our portion of that match would be the 105,876, and then the 10-5-41 from the state. So that's in, and then technically the state it's typically disperses those by the end of October. So that's what we'd be looking for, the state to make that disbursement at 10-5-41. So in the September meeting, we would expect to see that. I'm sorry, in the December meeting, we expect to see that our match has been reported to the state, and then WFPD, and then the match from the state required contribution match would likely be in that.
The C1, what does that refer to?
C1.
Applicant's contribution. This is 116.
So the 113,437.
Well, that's a very not that's required.
Yeah, no, well, that I need to.
That
Once.
I think that was our contribution last year.
Yeah, I need to look at.
county verifies the 10,000 that they had.
No, because it should be the it should be the
116.
Yeah, so the 116,417. Would be the total required. And then so it's the 105 plus the 10,541 is at the 116,417. That is actually in based off of this, and then the actual report is the 116,417. So that was last year's required contribution. So we'll have to look into that part of the application and go online to do that. So it'd be 116,417.
This is what we've done up to this point in time.
No, we haven't put any money in this year so far.
Right.
So I'll need to look at that on the application site for the DOLA, and to see what that piece is there. So, we submit in addition to this, we submit a copy of our contribution report, and then we submit a copy of the actuarial report showing what that state matches. So the part that showed in the application should have been the 116,417. So
And so the 116 is that's the amount we have to at least to minimum.
that is the required contribution based on the actuarial report that was done in 2021. It's done now, and so between our match and then state match should be the total out to the 116%. And then I'll review the application online and then we can look at if that entry needed to be amended.
Could that possibly be the 113 plus expenses?
No, it should just be this rate. It should just match that total required contribution by the actuarial fee, so it should be that total 116,417.
Okay.
I think 113,437 was what our total was for last year. So if that was in there and carried over and it would just make the correction, then that carried over in that application. So I think that's probably where it's that.
Thank you for bringing that.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad, huh, all that negative on there. For the, what we're losing in, our stock value.
Investment, yeah.
But anyone have any other questions or comments on the treasurer's report? So we'll move on. Our order of business for tonight is the revised pension board bylaws approval.
Yeah, so you will find your packet with them, come back and forth for a couple of meetings with comments and things on those. So I took all the suggested comments that were off the last one, found the most current version of the document, and then got all those in there. So the bulk of it landed in Article 1. Most of the things we found tied into with it being really falling back into naming out and specifically talking about volunteer fire department members, because the language really kind of had previously been written probably before we were in a place where we had paid and volunteer. So after that was so cleaning up some of that. And then the other part, the bigger part, the other piece was in the attachment 1 and attachment 2. So both of those needed updating to the attachment 1 to all the current benefits based off of the changes that were adopted in end of 2021 for 2022. So that reflects those numbers, and that comes directly out of the actuarial report for that with our option B from there. And the second one really was just some minor cleanup on some order of business that we identified as we look through those. Just talking about the one was related to June. We called out May doing the new election. I think that it had typically going to always follow the election piece of that. The other part that was a question on the in the actual bylaws. And after I looked it up in the state, and it was Article 5, which talks about the state matching funds. It had said in June, by June 31st. The other one had said June 31st, but it's when this DOLA opens up the application period. So there's not a hard to call it as a hard date. It would be whenever they open the application period to do that. Then it's just ensuring that the application gets completed and submitted in time during that period. And then from the way that the language had read, the pension fund treasurer was to submit that, but DOLA uses the online application process that whoever has the login can do the login piece of that to be able to submit that. So really, I think the the language that we look at, tied in really just to ensure that that happens during that period.
But it's still, it's still the responsibility of the treasurer
To ensure that it's,
to make sure that happens.
yeah, so.
You'll let me know.
Yeah, that's what's in here. So we did, so the application has been submitted, and that's what was in the, what we call the question. That's the application.
Got it.
So,
with you.
so it's in the application submittal process now. So that was, we completed that last Thursday or Friday or something like the day. When it runs through, I think the end of the month is when applications be submitted. So, so I will go into the DOLA site just to review the application if there's any needs and make those corrections. Usually stuff gets kicked back with things like that, which is kind of the way that they.
Has all that been transferred to Christine, all the access to FPPA and everything?
Well, I think we probably need to set up some accesses to that, or do that and get logins, and that's gonna, so we'll slip through that. Whatever we
Okay.
to do from like authorization letters to get logged in into that stuff. So that, those were the primary areas of what the edits had involved. For the board, with the approval that was done in previous ones, that it just takes the one reading in front of the board one presentation to put on that. So with them, with affirmative motion to vote, it could be not.
The bylaws, you're
Correct.
Any comments on the revisions to the bylaws?
I read through the statutes this afternoon and I didn't see anything that was different, so.
Well, then at this point,
So I will motion that the board approve the revisions to the Wellington Fire Protection District firefighter pension fund bylaws.
do we have a second? Jason, second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I will make the change to, we'll have to sign it, rather than doing strike through this, just use the template panel that had the names of all the members for his affirmative vote, but, member Turks is not here, so I'll make have one ready to go sign, but we'll make a new copy and then. So thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Anybody have any other pertaining to the pension board? Then I motion that we adjourn the September pension board meeting at 4:20. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. And just make note, future pension board meeting, next one will be December 14th. At 4 o'clock. Same location.
Yeah, so this, there's the other ones, yes. So
Sure.
Let's get another minutes to release that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But if anybody needs to restroom or anything, you have a couple of minutes. We need this transition.
I got one. Thank you.
Yeah,
everybody
Everybody got it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Let's stand for the pledge of allegiance.
So I'd like to allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Jason. Christine.
Here.
David here. Steve here. And myself. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda for tonight?
None.
Anybody having any conflict of interest with any business that might occur in tonight's meeting, please make notice now. Good. Correspondence, it looks like we got a thank you card.
Yeah, so there's a couple, for, make note of, so the first thing here is a thank you card, with, for, a letter that's attached that, was dropped off at the station and came in and anonymous from Wellington County, so it's good in that. And then the other that you'll see is, it's just a sample of, on September 11th, the, groups on the Irish American Revolution dropped off a whole stack of cards for kind of all the first responders on stations. So great. We go from there, so there's kind of just a sample of one of them out of there. So there was probably 20 of them or something like that. So that were dropped off. So more,
Great.
yeah.
And are those, at least the one by cell phone hung somewhere?
It was put around on it's been, the crew had been kind of using this as a morning brief table, so we're put it upstairs for a little bit, put it on over here with the other cards, I think that. Like you sit on the side and scoop up the meeting.
Sure. Okay, move on to public comment. Any member or resident of the district that would like to comment on items not listed on the agenda may be restricted to a 3-minute limit per person, just to make everybody aware. Do we have any public comment tonight? Anybody like to? Okay. So, guests or presentations. I think we having,
So
yeah,
nothing yet. So,
okay.
well, yeah, the financial audit presentation, so but it's number one. Yeah, so it was just, yeah. We got messaged me earlier that she's on the way, so we might just move that down.
Okay,
Down, depending on it's we haven't got to it yet, but it'll be after me. So
okay, well, if you see her come in,
Yeah.
just
yeah, she messaged me earlier. She's
give
on the
me
way, so
something.
seeing if she emails, because she told me earlier that she was.
Okay, well, if she shows up, we can squeeze her in.
Yeah.
Okay. Consent agenda. Regular board meeting minutes from August 10th, 2022. Anybody want to peruse those and see if there are any additions, deletions, or corrections?
All motion to accept the regular board meeting minutes for August 10th, 2022.
As presented.
And presented.
Do I have a second? Yeah, second. Thank you, Jason. Okay, all those in favor, aye.
I
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, fire chief's report.
All right, thanks. Right on. Decide for just a minute, sure. So we haven't done official badge pinnings and swearing in yet, but I need to introduce a couple of folks to you here. So some of you know firefighter used to be Cody Kelly, but Cody Kelly got promoted recently, went through a better process for an opening, and he's a new fire engineer for us. So Congrats, Cody, thanks for doing that, and we're gonna take an opportunity as we get sooner to do more of a official recognition, so. The other one we need to introduce is firefighter Rory Lovers. Rory is one of our two newest firefighters, so Rory started with us in August and is now on B-Ship folks. Cody Seals is the other new firefighter, and he had another engagement tonight, but I wanted to take a minute to recognize you, and thanks for being here, and thanks for the hard work, and glad to have you part of the family, so. A couple other items, so start off running down, just of note, a significant event. We got most of the folks here we traded off, so on the 8th, couple weeks ago on September 8th, Thursday afternoon, on a nice warm end of multiple days in a row, we had the storm front came in and had lightning strike off of the east facing, just off of County Road 21 and 66. B-Ship was on duty, 17, and was first out of the gate on that. So eventually worked out to be just over 200 acres. We had a lot going on kind of in the first few hours of the incident, but quickly evolved into a unified command with LCSOs, emergency services, and then PFA and state. It kind of was on the northern edge of Kremers and Arapahoe Valley. So the first right mid slope in there. So rocky terrain, inaccessible really with vehicle access. So it was a lot of hiking, a lot of back pumps, and a lot of hours. So we basically had crews on the fire overnight and swap crews out through until 7 in the morning. And when we swapped crews in the morning for the second operational period, at midnight, we transitioned command to Larimer County Emergency Services, so the county took over with that. But we had a couple air tanker drops that came in early. We had helicopter drops. We got just in a window of time where we were able to get some aircraft that was available in the area. The fire pushed through and then up the face and then up into kind of in between a little saddle on Arapahoe Valley where there was a house that sat right on that side. So really the work that was done by our crews being aggressive into staying in there, the FA crews that had gotten dispatched to Kremers, the airdrops that happened, and a lot of work by the Larimer County, the IA mod, and a lot of folks saved any houses from being destroyed. Very, very minimal damage to just the eastern facing slope of the one house that was on the saddle up from there. Some airdrops. So the incident stayed under Larimer County Sheriff's command until noon on Saturday. We had the storm front that came through and got it down to the point where they were able to call it contained, 100% contained at noon on Saturday. We still continue to do patrols overnight through the day as our crews went up back and forth with that until Monday. Captain Pettit and I went up there on Monday morning with Larimer County Emergency Services. They flew their IR drone and we flew 4 separate flights over the area and then walked most of the western base through the Mountain Mahogany and that. So just to make sure that we were still in the place where we could call it then under control. So at 100 hours on Monday, we called it under control and then waited the full 24 hours and then some just to make sure. And so at 1500 hours on the next day, we called it out on the Thursday morning. And then went with Larimer County Sheriff's and then the state so that we could do all the work paperwork so that we don't have to pay for a tanker and tanker drops and helicopters. So we did all the paperwork submission was completed that morning. We have to do it in 7 days. So we got all that done and took care of all that. And then just the partnership with Larimer County because the county owned a bunch of costs still over the next couple of days, right? The meals and things that happened those few days. So just again, the mutual aid partnership, but we had in the early phases of it, it was both of our units, emergency callbacks. So we had people that came in off duty to cover water tender. We had folks that came in off duty to cover other engines. And then we had folks that came in overnight and early in the next mornings to do patrols. And just, I mean, almost everybody I think that was here was on the fire at some point of it, plus a bunch more. So that piece of it was huge to be able to see folks come back and assist with that. But along with that, we had Livermore that came help, PFA, we had Nunn, had Windsor, Loveland, Pottville, Gilcrest, and then the Winds Task Force, so we had Burford units and Secondary there. So pretty big response to an area that it really, as it moved through that piece with the storm front changing there, had really good opportunity for some loss of some other structures on that really tough, inaccessible area, other than the type sixes, but that 173 got up there, and you guys were in there with that. Quite hard to say the house over there. So we did really proud of the work that our folks did, and the commitment to multiple days of assignments to do that. So thanks for the hard work.
Good job, guys.
Yeah, really good job. And then we had,
I only have one question.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
the whole fire was contained in our district.
The whole fire was contained in our district. We only have to go a couple more addresses on parameters before it goes into the
Switch it
DFA.
over. That's what I.
But all of it stayed in our district, but as many know, and it's good for me, but it's only accessible really for us to travel to get to there. We've got to go through and then come back up. About grammar to get into that. So long response time. Just think someone looked at it here as they're getting ready to go, 35-minute response time from here, travel distance to go.
Yeah.
And that's on some of those roads that, you can't really go the speed limit, it says that it's.
Let's see.
And then fresh off the press at 10:04 today, we dropped a call. Actually a little bit before the crews on duty dropped a critical EMS call that was on the east side of town. So both of our units plus Lieutenant Dells assisted in the patient care and landed a helicopter to the emergent patient off to the hospital. And talk about type of medical event, but patient that, because of the good interventions and the quick interventions and that part of it, has probability for a better outcome than we could have hoped for.
Good.
But at the same time, we're really about 5 minutes after that call dropped was when we dropped the hazmat call on North Third. So we had receiving a delivery of a 250-gallon tote of 25% caustic chemical. Just had an incident on offloading where the offloading vehicle damaged one of the other totes of the same type of material, and so had a release of, call it approximately 200 gallons of caustic material outside, and so just a unified response because they were all on the call. The call initially went to PFA's engine 12 as a hazmat incident, so I jumped the call to go with that, and then so it was a unified command with ourselves and PFA, their hazmat, and then one of their units. And then as soon as 17 cleared from the other call, they came and assisted. So we primarily were tasked with making sure identifying chemicals, and then containment to make sure that we weren't having anything that was going to get into any waterways. So worked with the town staff. Town staff had already started that, and then tied in the unified command with the town of Wellington, their staff from there. So between all of us worked on the containment piece of that, and then the diking and the cleaning contractor to clean that up, and then just kind of really work with the understanding what the evacuation distance was based off that kind of thing, proximity to the liquor center, which had an event going on, and just making decisions on shelter in place versus evacuation. So took care of all that, and then kind of crossed into, as we were monitoring through with PSD for the school district because of the proximity to schools and when the schools release and that kind of thing, just to make sure. So LCSO brought in other resources and then brought in other school resource officers and other community service officers to help make sure that we use the direction of travel that they could come in and out of, and that was communicated very well. So all the good thing about all that is all without incident. They had one minor exposure to one of the workers, just in contact with the chemical, was decontaminated on scene, treated and evaluated and released by the ambulance. It's good. That's couple big ones. Let me blast through a couple other things important. So we've spent over the last couple of months, staff, Lieutenant Dells isn't here, but between other staff. So we really took a hard look at some of the things that we can do to make sure that we're evaluating costs and doing cost reduction, whatever we can. So just really the cost of fuel and some of those things we've looked at, brought on, I think, for us. So we went through the process to get quotes on bids and go through the permitting process internally to do that. But we have now a fuel tank, a temporary fuel tank at this location and at 17 that we're receiving the undyed non-tax fuel through the process and through the application process to do that. So we're getting in at about $1 a gallon less than what we're paying for it, and it comes delivered. So we'll be fueling from here in 17. It's a temporary option, no cost for the tanks. We either pay a little bit of money just for the the hoses and the nozzles and stuff, but it's a leasing program through Gulf Petroleum. And we'll continue to monitor that as we go through from there, which should save us pretty enough money in the remainder of the year to cover any of the costs we get from fuel delivery and setup and ongoing on from there. So it's many other fire districts are doing that. And so anything that any vehicles that qualify with that diet fuel on that.
Great.
So set up that. We did have we had a meeting with our Verizon rep to really completely go head to toe through all of our contract with Verizon, all the phones we have online, the cell phone accesses and all the things we have from there. So we were able to identify the lines that we didn't need, the things that are backup lines and all those, identify all of those and then reduce the lines that we have. So we're going to cut about 25% off of our monthly Verizon bill. And then we had a bunch of old devices that we were able to back through and return on that. There are a couple other items that were some equipment that was purchased but never put into service. Some radios and things that we did look back through and were able to restock on those and basically get all the costs back on those. So and minimizing some of those things. So it's just stuff that we've been able to kind of, and it's, staff has been really doing the work about looking through about the stuff that we have, identifying those. Do we need this? We've had it for this long, we haven't used it. Do we need to use it, right? Are we anticipating getting more apparatus or that kind of thing? Do we need to install these radios? And so the decision being that we were able to do that and get some of that back. So over the last few weeks with active engagement from the line staff as well as Lieutenant Dells, who've been picking off little things and bits and pieces on apparatus maintenance that's been deferred and things. So staff been really involved working with him to help do those things that we can do in house and take care of those. So fixing problems and taking care of things from there. Captain Pettit and Lieutenant Delps communicating with staff here. We've also had a meeting with Platte Valley, just kind of getting our minds around and prepping for an ISO audit that we know is going to come. We're kind of overdue for that to happen. So just doing the things that we can to take care of the stuff that we should be doing for that in place. So capturing certs, staff, we got information on fire hydrants and got all that stuff. The shifts divided up by 3, and they've been entering all the information for hydrant locations into reporting. Got information from the town on what the hydrant flows are for those. So getting all of that stuff. So line folks have been doing it and work with to get that stuff done. So
Does it look like we're gonna at least be able to maintain?
I would say it's hard to say right now, but I think we're looking to kind of really take a hard look at like what are we doing already and what are we documenting, what should we document, what things can we do to document from there. But that's cool. I don't know that anything's changed otherwise to keep us not to do that.
Right.
But it's a matter of making sure we're not falling down on things that we should be doing. We should be able to focus on that. We've been since departure of Kelly, we're doing most of the HR stuff here using Employers Council as a kind of a service. So spent the last handful of months really just evaluating what we need, where there's things that look like they're identified as potential problems. So I reached back out to Employers Council, and they're going to we have more of a dedicated person that lives local in Fort Collins now. So she's been helping just to work on some of the personnel stuff that we have that we need to line up from there. Looking through policies, looking through that. Employers Council did our annual handbook review for that, so I got the comments back on that. So after we get a chance to look at those and go through that part of it, that'll come back to the board for approval with whatever potential comments they have from there.
And it's still being pretty cost effective.
Yes, yeah. So it's basically just on an hourly basis as needed. So we in the amended budget, we laid out 40,000 for a year for HR administrative services, but right now we're looking at kind of trying to tie that into probably about $1,000 to $1,500 worth of work. So we're going to just parcel out only that much work, and depending on what we need, but we'll see what it is. So if we committed to, I forget the number, but I think if we committed to 80 hours of work, we get a lower rate on that part of it. So okay, 80 hours, but it's also not 80 hours of. It doesn't have to be used by a certain time. I think it has 6 months or something. That goes 8 hours. So we're just kind of parsing out 2 hours, 4 hours at a time kind of a thing. And so doing some of that as we need be. And then that'll give us an opportunity as a resource to kind of help us as we move forward.
Right.
And then just some of the last little bit, finishing our prep work, working with JVG for, we'll talk about later on the 2023 budget. So getting the numbers that we got from there and that coming out. And then those are kind of the big items from that there. So
Anything else?
No. Yeah, yeah, I know. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you got anything going for Fire Prevention Week or, cause I know that's coming up.
It's coming, I mean, we have a couple, so we've had some schools that have reached out for those, and so we're gonna some school things we're go from there. We haven't set up anything more of a, in a sense of like anything sort of out of the fire station house, so we've got a few days of school visits already kind of on the target. So, yeah, but it's kind of now, so typically what happens, we'll get some reach out from some of the water stations to do that. So, yeah. So, we had brought up at the beginning, and it may, I think she may just be that we got a little bit ahead of anticipated time, but if you, we can potentially move item 1 down to there, because it would be the 2021 financial audit presentation by Haney on where they are map, and then the presentation for that, for the submission deadline of September. Which we'll be able to move that down. She just has a short PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll want to discuss.
So. Anything else on chief report?
No.
Okay. Moving on to district business. As we were just discussing, we're going to temporarily move item 1 under district business down to what would be pretty much item 5, anticipating her arrival. So we'll move to item 2, acceptance of tabled July monthly financial report.
So there were some questions about the financial report from June that were out there. So that following the meeting, Dr. Gator put them into writing for us. We put that through, and then JVG had a chance to look into it, and myself responded to all the questions from there, and then sent in the amended, and I didn't include all the other long detail reports into the copy to print out from here, but that was shared with the board following that. There haven't been any other questions posed since then, but we did, the motion was to table acceptance at the last report, so.
Okay.
So I think really just from order of business, if there's any other shot, yeah.
So the credit memo to refund for the return apparatus repair parts. Because you were mentioning that you guys went through things and restocked. Is that part of the restock you're talking about?
It won't be reported, and it still won't be reported in this, even this month. We just did it. So,
So
Yeah.
this is separate, so something we bought that we returned.
yes, and which, I'm sorry, which one? Yeah, I think typically that, yes, so we did have, this one was another apparatus part that we had that was more than a year and a couple years old or something, and Lieutenant Delse had identified that we didn't really have a need to use that. If we needed it, we would put it back. So it was around $1,200.
So my thought is, if we can put, because we bought something and then returned it and got the refund, it's like we never bought it. If we could put it back in the account that it was purchased out of, so that for budgetary reasons, we can see how much it's spent. It's like it was never spent, so now it looks like we could have overspent that budget line item. So I was wondering if we could put that in the place where it came out of.
So, Chief, I'll take that. So I unfortunately don't know the specifics on that specific transaction, so I have to look at it. But because we do an annual audit and we're required to follow GAAP as far as our financial statement presentation goes, if it's a significant amount, we actually do have to show it as income. And can't offset the expense because it's money coming back to us. We actually received the money. It wasn't like we didn't pay for it. We did pay for it.
Right.
And then the money came back as a refund. So I'll look at if it's significant, then the way it's presented is the accurate way from a financial perspective, accounting perspective. But if it's an immaterial amount, then we can offset sometimes the expense.
And what is a significant, what normally?
Given our budgets, I mean, $1,000 or more can be, rather significant.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
And I know the next couple just off the top of my head are going to be more than that. So we had a $1,200 one and another The most recent one's at 42 or $4,700.
Okay, so we'll do that sometime revenue as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably for the next. report.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it with table. Is there any other questions, comments?
You need a motion. to
Yeah, we'll
accept it?
need a motion to go back and accept that.
I make a motion to accept the July financial report.
Do we have a second?
Okay.
David, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, monthly financial report. So if you'll review your balance sheet, reconcile page balance.
Gabe,
Profit and loss.
James Benson.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, you guys have the August financial report in your packet. A couple things I want to highlight for you. And I'm on page 5 of the report, if you want to follow along there. So turn off revenue for the month was $47,321. We were under budget by 25,000. That's primarily being driven by timing on property tax collection. On the expense side, our total direct operating expenses were $212,094. We're actually under budget by $3,400 for the month. Couple things I want to point out though. Fire administration was under by $7,500 roughly, and that was due to savings on accounting and treasurer fees, because we've already paid a lot of those treasurer fees early on before we had our collection. As far as personnel, it was over budget by about $12,000. Those mainly due to overtime, as well as we had a little bit of timing on an FPPA payment that we had from July that hit in the month of August. So that threw off that variance there. I'm actually happy to report on vehicle fleet and facilities. We increased fuel because of, the prospective fuel pricing increases. Obviously, we're still paying more than we paid, a year ago, 2 years ago, but it hasn't increased as much as it was originally anticipated. And then the increases we did see have actually come back down some, so we're starting to see some savings in those categories from a budget perspective. As far as year-to-date numbers, we're at $3,192,000 in total revenue. We are over budget by $204,000. About $150,000 of that overage is timing on property tax collection. We are ahead of where we've collected historically. Non-levy revenues are over by about $130,000. And we actually had $25,000 in donation, impact fees, as well as an insurance check. Insurance refund check is not refund, claim check is making up that difference as well. But I think it's a good point to kind of talk about, obviously we've got an insurance check. We now have an expense going out for that claim that we received. But again, because of, generally accepted accounting principles, we want to show revenue, we want to show expenses. And then when we dive into budgeting, we'll try to make sure that there's some reconciliation on significant items like that. But also making sure we budget appropriate enough for expenses and also budget, some of that miscellaneous income coming in as well. So good point. As far as expenses, we're at just over $2,065,000, which is good. We're $5,000 under budget on our direct operating expenses. A couple areas again to point out. Fire administration is over due to election. A lot of the payroll and payroll transition fees. Prior to the payroll transition, payroll was very labor intensive. The way it was set up, we were literally running payroll every week. And now the transition is finally completed. I hope everybody's happy with it. So that cost is decreasing now on a go-forward basis. So similar to this month where we're under budget on those fees, we'll continue to see that through the rest of the year. Treasurer fees, because of the revenue being ahead, treasurer fees are over as well. And so that's what's driving those fire admin fees. I do anticipate as we finish through the next couple of months, we'll see that come back in line more with budget by the end of the year. Personnel, even though we had that overage for this month in August, we're actually under budget year to date by $4,400. I do know, as Chief mentioned, the fire incident earlier this month will probably push us over again for the month of September, which means we may be actually an over year-to-date perspective, but we'll kind of obviously update the board on that. Rest of the categories are under, fuel and vehicle maintenance is also driving our fleet and facilities cost. There is an overage on training and health by about $10,000, and that was for health and safety training that the department received. Only other areas you notice on the contingency line item, we are over by about $1,900. That's mainly being driven by the interest expense on the line of credit. So once we get obviously that addressed and paid off, and we're no longer needing that line of credit, we'll be sitting good there. Only other thing I want to point out to the board, if we actually go back to page 2 of the financial report, our general fund revenue, not our capital fund revenues or impact funds, is actually ahead year over year by 486,000. Now that sounds great. I will point out that we have 450,000 on the line of credit, but the good news is we are actually ahead from where we were last year this time by about 36,000. So we are moving, the district's still moving forward in the right direction. Unless there's any other questions that the board has on the August report, Director Gator did get us her questions ahead of time. And so if the board doesn't mind, I'll kind of go through some of those. We'll have to tag team it a little bit here.
Yeah.
Some of those are more his questions than mine, but we happy to kind of get those answered. So one of the questions was access to the Brandon Hobbs drive.
So we use ICC is our IT consultant. Anytime we have an employee that departs, we have shared folders on our IT on our server drive that may have documents in that. So as a training chief, we maintain training records and some of those things. So we just need to be able to get that drive mapped over so somebody could access that drive. And that's just a fee that the IT contractor charges to do work like that.
Okay.
The next question was regarding kind of a duplication of some services like Zoom, Adobe, Pro. Historically, the way the credit card was entered was as a bill. So when the bill came in, it was entered in the accounting system as a bill and then paid from there. What we started doing in August is actually entering the credit card charges and reconciling the credit card, which is actually more best practices. So for August, because of the transition, you're getting a double up of the bill from July. And then now the actual August transition. So no duplicate. And that also answers the question on the Verizon bill. It was the same thing. Why there's two charges from Verizon.
Even though they're different amounts.
Yes.
Because our month is not the same every month, and so that's so we typically see a different. It just depends on usage and some of that kind of thing. So yeah.
Then the next question, Chief, regarding district pay for firefighter meals.
Oh, yes. So so you'll see on those when it shows firefighter rehab. So that's times where we've had incidents like one today or the fire the other night where our firefighters go past a meal period and they're not able to get food or nourishment, that kind of thing. So other times they will have gone shopping and bought all the groceries and the groceries are in the vehicle and they're gone for hours. So on some of those incidents, we will pay for meals, we'll pay for water, we'll pay for food, those kind of things to do rehab so that they can take a shower, get their stuff back in gear, eat meals, and then go from there. So it's another part of the question talked about, is there an entertainment category? And we don't, it's not part of like a firefighter appreciation type thing. It's really an operational piece of allowing to be able to pay for meals to do that and get them nourished and get them back to work.
The chief, the next question was regarding the water bill for station 16.
Yeah.
That's actually hitting the waste line item.
Because it's for the sewage, it's for the sewer payment.
We don't have any water.
That's the only bill we pay. Yeah.
But on the bill, it's split water and sewer or
No,
water?
it's sewage, yeah.
We're not charged for water usage.
Good deal.
Peer support.
Oh, yeah, the question was, what is peer support? And so, yeah, it's our employee supported program there. I know there's a secondary question, the two questions were about that, so I think of the
Health and safety.
Yeah, probably that. The best thing is that in that, and we have a couple of our peer support, and the other question is one of our new peer support members in there. So But we use, the first responders trauma counselors is our overreaching peer support agency. And within that, we train people within our own fire district to be peer members to provide emotional and support for many litany of different type of things from there. So, but we have folks in-house that are trained to do that. And then, so that's kind of where the house, in a short abridged answer what that is. And so
It's training, you're saying.
no, the peer support is literally peers supporting other peers
Oh.
for, when we have tough calls, we have other in-house things going on, family things going on for a litany of other stuff and that also or said probably explain a little better, but it really is it's really us providing support to others. And oftentimes, because of the network, the way it works is we may have Wellington people come in and provide peer support to PFA members, or PFA people might do it for birthing people. It's a big network of actual under the license of a true counselor to help provide that support.
So can you explain the difference between the monthly fee versus the?
Yep, the monthly fee is a monthly fee that we pay for a total contract to provide and oversee and do all those services. And the one-time fee you saw was because we paid for a new person to go to training.
Okay, so that was the training, the one time is training, but the other times they're not training, they're just to be part of the network.
Part of the whole, part of the whole service. So when somebody goes for service, there's no cost to the employee, there's no limit to the employee visits. There's no 24/7, 365. There's a phone number to call, there's support that can come to you, place that they can go. All of that is covered under the program.
That's a monthly, but then the one time someone, we added someone, a member.
Yep, we just put the new person through training.
Oh.
We paid the fee for them to attend the 40-hour training. So
Nice, okay.
newly promoted fire engineer and now fully supported peer support.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you for explaining.
So 80 hours of full on intense stuff, but 40 hours of, yeah, 40 hours.
I got a question for you. You
Yes, sir.
touched on the bank loan interest. Where does that show up on here again?
At the very bottom, that contingencies line,
Do you know what page that's on?
I do 5, and then it's page 5, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know you touched on it, but I missed, okay.
Yeah.
That's under debt services,
Correct.
okay. Well, I don't know if we had a line item for loan payment and 0. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, the next question was regarding, again, the accounting fees. I think I addressed that a lot in the financial report, but just kind of want to add, because I know another question was asked about using the employee council in the savings. And prior to what, Chief coming here and bringing JVG in and employer council, with the new model, the district is still saving over 150,000 a year just in those services. But yes, to answer your question, that is going down significantly. And on a go forward basis, we won't have those costs for payroll transition, or running 4 to 5 payrolls a month. So
Yeah,
But so the payroll is not part of the SOW, that's separate, and you guys are keeping that? Or are we?
Paylocity.
Yeah.
Velocity is gonna take a lot of that. We're gonna still have a part of that. I was talking with Ben. He's unfortunately not here because he goes back out. He's walking around like Quasimodo right now. But I think we can include that within the statement of work pricing. We're gonna see how it goes on a go forward basis and evaluate that. But I think it's fair, given now the way it's going and it's going smoothly, that I'm comfortable making that transition.
Got it, thank you.
Payroll, health and safety, you covered, chief. And the last one is the money in and out between the reconciled balance report and the disbursement report. So first explain the reconciled balances report is the summary of the bank reconciliation, which shows the money in and the money out that actually hit the bank statement in that month of time. So the beginning balance is what the bank says the beginning balance is. The ending balance is what the bank says the bank balance is. And then there's a register balance, which says that's what our financials say. And there's a variation there because you have checks in transit, you have deposits in transit, you have outstanding checks. So sometimes those numbers match up when you happen to get a nice clean cutoff on your financials and the bank financials, but a lot of times those numbers don't match because we wrote checks on the 31st that didn't clear till, the next month. And vice versa, we may record a deposit because it came in here, gets deposited at the bank, but they post it 24 hours later, which is the following month. And so that covers the majority of it. There's one other point I do want to make on the differences in the amounts. And that is the employee level detail on the checks. We as our role don't think it's appropriate to include employees' names and pay amounts on a public document that's regularly circulated. So we exclude that. We include the gross amount that's coming out for payroll, but there are a few employees that get manual checks. And so that's not included either in the financial report, because again, I wouldn't want a public document going out with my name and how much I'm getting paid every 2 weeks. And so that's what explains those differences from that standpoint.
The biggest one is the 350,000 coming out of the money market. It's on the reconcile, but it's not on the monthly disbursement. So did it happen in the previous month? Just to be
Yes, I believe so. Let me see here.
in our.
Yes,
Happened.
Gabe it did, yeah.
it was on 7/27, but didn't clear till August. So yeah,
Makes sense. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Comment? Then I motion that we approve the monthly financial report as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Christine second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay,
Christine Todd is here from Haney to do the presentation, so if the board would accept that item one that we moved down. It was taking a minute. She's got a short PowerPoint, so and pause for a minute, I'll get set up, I'll put it up on that in there, and then we can go over that. So
hi Christine.
Hi. We do have copies for you all as well. So she gives those to you.
So my purpose tonight is to provide you with communications at the end of the audit. And I'm guessing that you've seen a copy of the draft audit.
I haven't submitted to the
They
board
have
yet.
not
No.
seen it yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the copy of the draft report that you will be receiving in our data and MD&A. I know we haven't seen that yet put into copy draft yet.
Okay, I think that we'll wait some comments from chief on the MDNA.
Okay.
And that'll go.
Okay, so once the MD&A joins the draft financial, you will see then a copy of that. So we have prepared the draft report, we have finished our audit work. And I would like to, thank Chief Patterson and JDG for working with us. It's been an interesting year, I know, as everyone knows, with COVID. And so we've also experienced staff shortages and all this kind of thing. So I know in normal circumstances, we would have liked to have completed the audit in a much more timely manner. So I do appreciate you all allowing an extension of time for us to complete our audit work. So we lost some staff. We did have a staff person that was out here working with us who had a baby. And so, and getting additional staff has been tough. So I just want to show, thank you very much for that. So there has been an extension for the report to be filed with the state. That report is due to the state by September 30th. And so that report will be filed in time with the state. You'll receive a draft before then, be able to take a look at the draft, be able to take a look at the MD&A. These are your financial statements. So we audit the numbers in there and we provide our opinion on those financial statements and whether or not they are, materially fairly stated. But they're your financial statements. So anything that you see in there, as long as it's within standards, accounting standards that you feel like needs to be changed, language wise or anything like that, you certainly can let us know. So just so you know, once you have that draft report. Just a little bit about our audit process. So our job is to come in and we take a risk-based approach to our audit. So we're going to look at the financial statement line items and we're going to determine where the highest risk accounts will be and take a deeper dive into those. And so usually that's with our surrounding revenue. We'll take a closer look at your revenues. We'll do a little bit of a deeper dive around revenue. We set a materiality threshold, we look at those risks and we select those accounts, and from a sample basis, we'll take a look at all of the documents that support the transactions to make sure the transactions are appropriately reflected in the financial statements. So that's our process. We do walk through internal controls. We don't test internal controls. We walk through them to gain an understanding of those controls in order to be able to develop our procedures. If there's anything as we walk through controls that we felt like was concerning that we needed to bring to your attention, we would do that. But just so you know, we're not auditing the controls, we're just auditing the balances on the financial statements. Some of the required communication swings based on estimates. In regards to audit adjustments, I don't believe we had any audit adjustments. I will attach those in the management communications letter if we did. Nothing significant to note that would be any sort of material weakness or significant deficiency. So if there was any adjustments that were as a result of material weakness or significant deficiency, we would note those. And so, working with JDG, it's great. They're, keeping an eye on making sure that everything is reported as it needs to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And so we didn't come across any thing that was significant to note there. No disagreements with management, no other findings or issues. I know reached out to me about impact fee. Maybe it was you that reached out in regards to the impact fee analysis. So we did take a look at that impact fee account and looked at the total impact fees that have been collected and then the applicable expenses, capital expenses coming out of that account. And I know there's a lot of in and out in those accounts, but it appears in looking at it that the balance in that account does reflect what's been collected less what was allowed to be spent, allowable expenses from the impact fees. So I think there was definitely some transfers at certain times to maybe cover some operating expenses, and then that account was then replenished. But in the end, when you look at kind of total in and then total expenditures that were allowable out of that account, it appears that that is fairly stated. So we did take a good look at that. And I think probably I'll kind of note a little bit later on, just making sure there's a good reconciliation of that is an idea, obviously, that you want to make sure that you have that. The next graph, I'm just going to go over just some like overall financial information from the report. Once you get the report, if you have any specific questions, feel free to give me a call, ask me about it. I can, address any questions that you might have there. These are fund financial highlights. So when you're looking at the financial statements, you're going to see fund activity, which is based on kind of your sources and uses of your funds, very straightforward. That will really show you the activity, kind of the annual activity, what's coming in, the resources that you have coming in, and then the expenditures that are going out. The other two reports that come at the beginning of the financial statements are government-wide, which then brings on your capital assets, any of your lease obligations will show up on there, as well as all of the pension assets, liabilities, inflows and outflows. So this graph just depicts those fund financial statements and just shows you from 2019 through 2021, just the growth in assets. And then also the fact that you have a fund deficit in 2019 that is then, moved into a positive fund balance in 2020 and 2021. So that does kind of show, how financial health, if you can see that fund balance staying positive, that's definitely important. The next graph will show you your capital assets, and I apologize because the bottom part reflects the numbers for the capital assets, and those percentages are correct. The graph didn't pull those percentages incorrectly, but you can see that the majority of your capital assets, this is net of depreciation, is in buildings and improvements, followed by fire apparatus and equipment, and then land. When you're looking at long-term debt, you want to kind of just know what obligations are out there. And so this will show you 2019, 2020, and 2021. You'll see increases in capital leases. There was a new lease that was signed in 2020 for some equipment, and then you see that going down because payments on that lease obligation are being made. The loan payable there is in relates to, I think there was an in-kind exchange and were some impact fees that were paid on that land. And there was a note that was signed to kind of reimburse those impact fees. So that's the balance there, that 142,000 there. Compensated absences are as accrued vacation. And so that's shown as a long-term liability. So that basically is telling you kind of what the balance is there that would need to be paid out in accrued vacation at the end of the year, if it were all to be paid out, in the next, all of it would be paid out, that would be the balance. Then I'm just gonna go to the fund highlights, continue here with revenues and expenses. You can see revenues took quite a bit of a jump in 2020, and I believe that was largely due to impact fees. And I think a lot of them revenue as well. And COVID. Exactly, yes. So, and then, you can see your expenses are just kind of following, along with the revenues, which is a normal trend. Looking at the last few graphs, just show you your revenue by source. And so you can see that the majority of your revenues are coming from your property and ownership taxes, followed by charges for services, and then a little bit through operating grants and contributions. And then other, which I think is mainly, interest, because a lot of what's in that other category. And so you can see it trends fairly closely year to year. There's no, big changes there in the revenues. And then expenses. The next set of graphs is comparing last year to current year. You can see, again, they're very, very close, where the majority of the expenses are in your operations and admin categories, and followed by your fleet, facilities and training.
What percentage of the admin is just salary and benefits?
Yeah, I think that most of all of that is in operations. Yeah. And I could go and kind of give you a breakdown, to know what's included in the number that's on the financial statements. In regards to just looking ahead to 2022, the one item to consider, just in light of the financial statements and the financial reporting, is that there's a new lease standard that's going into effect that the government stands for, is required to be implemented next year. And it's WFPD 87 leases. And so that requires you anything that, and there's there are operating leases and then there are capital leases. So capital leases, you reflect the asset on your books. WFPD 87 will require us to state the asset on your books, even in some cases for operating. So yes, so that's a consideration, and we will be working on making sure that we have the information to be able to present it correctly in the financial statements. We'll work with JVG. We've got some people that we're working with that will make it fairly easy. You guys don't have very many leases, and so we do have some software that we can put all of the components of that lease, criteria of that lease into the software, and it will present the entries that need to be made on that government-wide basis for the leases to be presented correctly. So yeah, I know they've always got to come up with something new, right? Some new information that is important to have in there for the reader of the financial statements. And yeah, just like I mentioned in regards to the impact fees, I think just having a good reconciliation, tracking of that, some sort of spreadsheet that's showing you that those impact fees are being spent in the manner that they're restricted to, is a good idea. So the first question. But, I'm happy to answer any questions about the audit process, about the report. I know you don't have the draft in front of you yet, but when you do, you can certainly reach out to me.
In the report, are there benchmarks showing what we need to improve, or?
So we don't, the only thing I think I would suggest is that impact fee. As far as internal controls, we did not see anything that is concerning to us in regards to internal controls. So there would be, and especially if we felt like there was a significant deficiency or material weakness, but nothing at this time that we've identified. So, but you can always also reach out to us, in the future, if you feel like there's an area that you want us to work more closely at, when we're here performing our audit or something, we can certainly do that. So.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I'll get with you.
Back down to the board discussion item. 2023 budget development.
All right, so we started, have been working with, as I shared before, we've got the first, we look at the assessor's role for 2023. So the statement from the county assessor's office on our anticipated tax collections for 2023. So we're looking at just a little bit over a 1%, 1.2% increase in our anticipated property tax receivables, which it's going to account to about $37,000 increase for us in revenues for 2023 from the property tax perspective. So utilizing that, and then some of the work that done already to kind of get we're just getting ready to roll into open enrollment. So we've got our options out there for our plans, what that look like, what the anticipated increase is. We think we're going to see in for health insurance, and some of the other anticipated cost increases like our workers' compensation insurance. But we're waiting to get the final estimate from our insurance provider, because it's based on salaries. So we know that while the cost of the workers' compensation is going to go up slightly, our net cost at the end should be less than what we budgeted for and paid for last year, because we have less salaries than were on the books for last year. However, it's worth noting, because we underestimated salaries so much in 2021, that we paid an additional $10,000 in workers' compensation insurance in 22 for the 2021 workers' compensation insurance, because they do an audit at the end of every year to reconcile how much your actual salaries that were actually paid out.
Right.
So our $50,000 workers' compensation insurance turned into $65,000, $64,000, which all said and done, that we paid the additional $10,000 in 2022 for 2021. So we've been speaking with our insurance provider to make sure that they know, and we get a more of a solid line on what that is, so that we can budget for what we would anticipate to be the appropriate amount for that. And so utilizing that along with our what salaries we know we have, the steps that people that are not maxed out of their steps, what they would anticipate to get each year, put all that in with JVG on the budget shell that they've worked on before to know what that revenue piece looks like. And the other piece that we know that we're relatively conservative as we get the amended budget this year, and 69,000 or so for service fees, but we still feel like that 69,000 is probably a higher amount than we would ever receive in any normal fee, just our plan review, plan check, permit fees, because we've had a couple of years that are anomalies. The school, now we're in with the wastewater treatment plant. So we don't have anything on the horizon for 2023 that is that significant.
Right.
So where we looked at a year ago, we got about 200,000 in service fees for that. This year, we're hoping to get right around that 69,000 or 70,000 probably, but we would anticipate next year, probably more realistically, we'll look at some numbers, but we're probably looking at 10,000, 12,000, probably that. So the net difference that we're looking at working as a budget shell, that plugging in those numbers to give us, they'll actually have for us what we feel like is pretty solid based off of the actual employees and all the known costs. And then we're just factoring in some of those other changes, fuel costs. So as Dave talked about fuel, we anticipated higher. We're still a little bit behind on the billing that the county does for us. So that's one thing that I don't like, because we tend to be a couple months in the rears on bills. So even when we pay in January and February, we pay them that way, but it's really more like November, December. So it's kind of this rolling 2 month behind kind of a thing. So that will end with us moving into this, with the exception of very small, just some of our staff vehicles will still go through that county program, but everything else will, so the bulk of that will come. real time when we have fuel deliveries, we get fit bill, it's at 30, so we'll pretty much stay on top of that, but we're anticipating some savings on what we thought we would pay. I'm not sure that we'll be all the way back down to 2018,
Right.
2019 time, but we all also busy running that calls, so looking at season there. So all that being said, I think we're in a really good place for the October 13th or October 12th board meeting where we have to deliver that. So really it'll just be a board discussion as far as soon as we have something there that we can share, the board can decide on the calendar item had next Wednesday for a tentative from when we started in 21 to have a work session. But we've done a lot of work with that because we did do an amended budget just a couple months ago, where in a normal budget season, we otherwise wouldn't touch the budget. Except for after we finished it in December, so this would be kind of like the start of us spinning that up. So we're a lot farther down the road on this. So with that, we can kind of see as soon as we have something that's in the draft form on that, or real close. Working with Dom from Changements just to make sure that we know anniversary dates for everybody. So when those steps are due to come and those kind of things, so we can tie it down to however many months they're at this salary and when that step comes and when they would be the next, and those other associated costs that are driven by salary. So NDA those things. So it should be a good place. So that's kind of where we stand right now. And it's October 12th. And then that'll give us the 2 months before budget adoption time to decide on what other work sessions, other items we need to look at, or anticipated changes or priorities that we want to look at.
And just to clarify, we have an increase from the property tax of around 37,000, but then a decrease from planned inspections. So it's basically, we're gonna get less next year.
That's what we anticipate now.
Thank you.
Is there anything on the horizon really coming up?
Nothing. So what we do know, I think from 2023 and 2024, because we're property tax driven, it ties into the mill levy. So in 2023, we're in the every other year of assessed values. So this year is not a new assessment. So the assessed value changes will happen for next year. So in 2023, they will do new assessed values at the end of 2023, after everybody does their protests or whatever that is. Then at the end of 2023, we'll get the new assessed value rate anticipation from the assessor's office. It'll tell us what that is. Historically, we've never seen this low, and that it's hard to say because our history is very short in the sense of when we've been at this mill levy, at this piece to look at that. There's been, and then growth has happened in those timeframes that the new growth that happened in that non-assessment year is what we typically see that increase. So what new growth in that window was relatively small, I guess, in 2020, in 2022 for that.
Next year also.
So 2023 and 2024, it's not necessarily capped yet, but it's got a trigger to wait for once the wastewater treatment plant, I don't want to speak improperly, once the wastewater treatment plant and water treatment plant are online is when the decision can come to then release potentially more building permits or to evaluate commercial type occupancy usage that has a water impact. So we know from our side of it, we don't anticipate a significant amount. We're looking at 90 some column building permits each year on that piece of it. So the other piece that we're looking forward to in 2023, I should say looking forward to, but each year over the last couple of years, there have been ballot measure initiatives which look to lower property taxes, right? So in a couple different ways. So whether it's a lowering of the factors and the calculations that they use to set a residential assessment rate. So whether it's residential or commercial, so that factor. In 2023, there is going to be a ballot measure, which was kind of a response to one that we talked about a lot in like October, November, the big worry about that. I forget the number of that one that was going to be more of a significant impact to that piece that. So if that, what comes through with that, Larimer County is one of the counties that will be a portion of that stands to be made closer to whole for any of the offsets. So what the ballot measure, not the ballot measure, it was state bill that was passed through, which will for 2 years will lower and or give an exemption to the first portion of your residential assessment. What that is effectively doing is trying to lower the residential assessment rate and lower the property tax piece for properties. So for us, that means that will lower the amount of collection that we would get from that. But in that, in certain counties that have different assessed values, there's a provision to make them whole, either 60% a whole, 90% a whole, or 100% a whole, depending on certain other factors that are very. So we'll continue to monitor that as we get farther down the line of what that looks like. That won't affect us until we see the rates for 2023 that will be collected in 2024, and then the rates for 2024 that will be collected in 2025. So it's really next year's thing to keep an eye on, and then just keep an eye on if there's any other initiatives at the ballot that would attempt to lower residential assessments. So that's our kind of first big piece. There's been a couple other talk of a few things potentially coming in, but there's nothing really on the short-term horizon from a commercial perspective that would drive that other piece for us. So
Are we on a floating mill levy?
no, we're at set mill levy. We did pass a initiative went to the ballot measure to allow us to raise our mill levy to offset any reductions in the residential assessment rate. So that's what in for this year, our mill levy is 15.070, and it was raised from 14.999. We are dedicating that difference right now into the tax rebate, and so we're actually collecting the 14.999, and that would be depending on the board's direction, but that's in our forecasted plan for how we're going to take care of that. Is that we will still collect at that level, we'll still collect at the 14.999 and dedicate any difference in the reduction until we're at a point where we can make a decision to dedicate a larger portion of that mill levy difference to the tax rebate. So in theory, at some point, we would say we're going to collect 14.5 and 14.75 and dedicate all the rest to something to that effect is how that would happen. And the rest would be dedicated back to the tax rebate until such time is completely paid off. But other than that, and nothing promising on the horizon, I guess.
Right.
That's going to change that. So we'll really have to see, trying to look at the crystal ball. What does 23 do for residential assessed values? We're just kind of being aggressive on what we do and making sure we take care of things so that we can get to the debt paid off, so that we can weather if there is a bubble that reduces that, or anything else that reduces that. But we're not looking at trying to raise mill levies more to offset that residential assessment rate, only to have to do it back to the rebate of the taxes.
Right.
So we don't need to actually use it, or is it back to the tax rate?
And what the future holds, no one knows.
So I know we got for a little bit. How soon do we think maybe the first look at the 2023 draft budget in advance of Donaldson working on a few other numbers last, and kind of coming out of there. So probably in the next few weeks or so.
Yeah, and obviously we'll have something by October. Yeah.
So we're just talking about when maybe that point in work sessions or whatever.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions on that? And next up, we have Christine, who went to the SDA conference this year.
Thank you. I just want to share a few things that I learned. They're talking about since we don't have the money that like PFA has to offer great benefits, they were suggesting ways that we can market opportunities to work here as a small district or a family, since we don't have the benefits to offer. That was one suggestion when I went to the benefits class. Also, they talked about conducting employee surveys to understand employee priorities when it comes to wages and benefits, so that we're not paying for something that they don't like, that they're not using, or that has no value to the employees. So periodically doing surveys. They also there was a chief of Elizabeth did a session, And he shared that he likes to share the district's failures with the public so that in the future, they don't think that we're hiding things. They can look back in the past and say, oh, no, they've always shared whenever they've done something wrong, so therefore they're not hiding something now. So that was a really good takeaway. And then I went to a KPI class, key performance indicator. Just talking about using percentages to compare numbers to previous years, looking at cost per incident, cost per inspection, time that it takes for the right equipment to get there, the right personnel that's needed for that incident, instead of just what's our response time, but what's our response time for the right people needed to start whatever that incident is. So different key performance indicators. That's up my alley with numbers and stuff like that. And they also talked about another survey, I think this was the key performance indicator, talked about surveying your community. To see the satisfaction of our services, in case in the future we need buy-in to raise the levies and things like that. So if they're satisfied now, then that's a good indicator. And if they're not, we need to find out why and what's going on and fix it. So lots of surveys. He was talking about how he would, back in the day, just call every 10th person on the phone book, and that's how they did the survey. So random. I'm sure we could do it other ways nowadays, but and then the last thing is the elections, because we have elections coming up in 2023.
Yeah.
And the thing I learned is now, from now on, our terms have to be 4 years. And they always have been.
Yeah, something changed it to,
Oh, I thought it was 3.
I thought something changed it to. Yeah.
It's 3 on the website.
Well, because of changes at the state level to when elections are scheduled, district elections were moved to off years so that the county clerks aren't slammed with so many elections in the same year. So that's why this year's election and next year's election are 3-year terms. And then we'll go back to 4-year terms.
Next year is 4 years. Next year starts for 4 years, according to the lawyers that were talking in this.
Okay. I thought there were 2 3-year elections.
So that it's
but
always
maybe
on an odd now. So
Mhm.
4 years on the 2023. So now it's always gonna be odd year elections. We'll never have a even
Right.
year election. So, and then they're talking about SBA association was talking about putting together a property tax, either legislation or ballot initiative. I wasn't sure which one. Trying to get property tax to the local level so that what you were talking about, some people were doing ballot initiatives to reduce the property taxes. So that can't affect all counties. So that it's just at the local county level property tax. Interesting. Maybe that's going down the pipe. That's all I got. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for going. And
For the other, I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
no, go ahead.
I'm just wondering where the signatures were at. For the bank signature.
Oh, so I have just one
Yeah.
more form I need to get from Director Pettit, along with the signature piece into the bank for there. They wanted the whole packet complete from all that. Yeah, the person that was working with Set Points West is gone now too, so they kind of bounced over to another person there. So they have the entire packet complete for them to put it all together. So that's the last piece.
And when I stopped into First National, I stood there for like 30 minutes while they ran around trying to find the paperwork and.
And it was Set Points West. Yeah. So.
And then my other question I wanted to run by the board is, because our, what account is it in? The administrative account is, getting close to being over budget. I was thinking for, the, accounting expenses as treasurer, that maybe I can help lower the bill by doing some of the data entry. Simple data entry, so that could lower our accounting bill. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's what I do. What are your thoughts as treasurer that I could?
Good. Think about that.
I just, I thought to help lower expenses.
Right.
So just wanted to bring up. What you guys think about that, what your thoughts are? I know back in the day, the treasurer used to do it all right.
Not, never for operations of the fire department. Yeah, the board has never been in the operations of the fire department.
Got it. Oh, I see.
There's a complete.
Yes.
complete separation.
That makes
Yeah, it almost creates a conflict. Yeah. Because you essentially would be overseeing yourself.
Well, no, they would be overseeing, but.
Yeah.
I
But
would
ultimately,
do The
yeah.
entering of the data, and they would. Check it, but. That makes.
Anything else, Kristen?
Oh, no.
That's it? Does anybody else have any other for tonight? Well. Order items.
You know, there's a couple items from there, the next regular board meeting is October 12th. The only other thing too, I think is, again, attached to schedule on here of a couple other items coming. Between now and then, so we're pretty much on track for that. We had a tentative budget work session, so what we haven't called for anything and done that, and this shared another part of it. I think really that falls back more into that kind of standing calendar that we do, with the anticipation that we typically don't do budget work until we start to get into this time frame there. So there'll be time in between the October 12th and then the December 14th board meeting to have another work sessions if we need. And then we'll continue to go about that. But other than that, the other side of it, we'll talk about getting forward on that piece of it, because we did talk about elections as we work through the draft budget preparation. We're just to think ahead, we are going to have to do an election in 2023, and we'll be coming to the board for direction. If the board is agreeable, I'll always reach out again to Sue Blair's company. I the name was going to say Blair's Council. That's not right. But the other one, the same company that did help us with the election process before, just to check availability and see with those type of things, it's getting on the calendar earlier than better. So we're looking at that, and then looking again, we would need to then before at some point designate or declare a designated election official in there. So
And nomination, start in like December, the paperwork.
it's so we have a separate thing that we do for reaching out to all the volunteers as far as notifications and doing that annual notification, making sure that, but then the self nominations is how that would happen again. I think there's a time period we can kind of look at it and look backwards from there. I think this in January, the self nominations happen, and then it was they only opened, does it show on here, no electors, files, copy. Election, February 25th was self-nomination forms were due, and then writing affidavits. So I think it would probably be somewhere in that early January and mid-January time would be where you're able to pick up self-nomination forms and then turn those in. So
That's what I got from the law office about the timetable. for
Okay.
Election.
okay,
If that's.
okay, yeah, great. Is that a copy? Yeah, or is
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
Okay, okay, yeah, and that's what typically what our designated election official does for us and putting all those things together. So, yep. Great, okay. Great.
So we'll keep that on the back burner for now.
Okay, that's all I have for calendar items.
Okay. As the chief just stated, our next regular board meeting is October 12th at 4 p.m. Same place, same time. If there's nothing else, we will now motion for adjournment of this meeting at 5:47. Do I have a second? Jason seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank everyone for coming tonight.